pretty good. How about you?
Doing okay. I was just actually wanted to make sure I had all of my notes.
What's going on?
Oh, slow by me. What about you?
Yeah, just, busy with just everything. Everything's so, yeah, definitely not doing the kind of volume we want to do, but
I mean, thank God, and I mean, you guys have a lot of divisions in your firm, so but like for us, thank God, litigation is very busy.
yeah.
And I'm sure you guys do all different types of litigation, right?
No, my partners primarily, they do a lot of insurance work, particularly in the representing the co-op boards and the condo boards, and then attorney and accounting malpractice. So,
Wow, attorney and accounting malpractice.
on behalf of the insurance companies.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's tough stuff. Well, that's actually not right because you get your fees in advance and.
No, it's the reduced fees, so they don't love that, obviously.
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
grind.
no, I know.
I don't.
I got myself into a big one like that not that long ago on representing a board on a big case. And yes, that billing it's Chubb I'm working with, and what a pain in the neck that billing thing is.
It's a pain in the ass. I mean, I take litigation, so I don't fight with anyone. Not my style.
Yeah, I mean, I don't litigate anymore, so I agree with you. I like making deals and making nice at this stage of my life.
Yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, definitely not something. There he is.
Looks like he's ready to fight.
Always ready to fight, especially Neil Garfinkel, especially if Neil's online, because he's very aggressive, this Neil Garfinkel fella.
Yeah, exactly.
He was practicing. He was practicing his golf back there before you got on.
What else is new? I mean, this is what, like, Neil has 3 hobbies.
Don't even want to ask the other two.
Let's not.
I'll leave it to your imagination, Neil.
I was asking Neil, I said, I don't know, litigation's busy, but slow volume, low volume. Very.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fun time to be in our lovely industry.
No, it's boring, I like to see a lot of deals I like to see a lot of deals happening. I like being crazy. Being crazy makes me,
Makes you.
Makes me, exactly. But I feel like we have so many topics that we need to cover that we're not even going to have enough time. So, all right, Gary, take your pick. Which is the one that's really out there right now?
I mean, listen, I'm not a surprise what happened with, the Supreme Court not taking the 2019 rent law case and seeing how that was going to play itself out. I think that most people had hoped that would happen on the ownership side, to find some reasonable middle ground to get things moving in a different direction. So I think that has, far sweeping ramifications for people, because it's not going to help the lack of inventory that exists out there in the market, the lack of affordability. And I think that the city continues to find ways to make it impossible for people to develop and build, whether it's they won't approve 421A, they won't approve rezoning, they won't approve basement apartments. It's like they won't. It's like the city of no. Yet then they want to impose all these restrictions in the community at large, when the reason why there's no development falls squarely with them. So it's an interesting time that everyone agrees there's, an affordability issue and there's an inventory issue, but that for whatever reason, the state/city doesn't seem to want to do anything to actually have anything other than rhetoric and it's concerning, because I think that people want to help and want to build, but there's no incentive to.
And then we have the taxes. Local law 97, which is going to hit everybody, and then all of a sudden, how do they expect the owners to comply with that?
Yeah, I don't know. They're just, constantly looking for ways to impede business versus embrace business, and you need a different leadership group to get them to understand, like, you don't always have to get everything you want for things to be where they need to be, and the tax base shrinks. Commercial property values are decreasing tremendously. The city's going to have a fiscal crisis unless they figure out a way to be pro-business. And it just doesn't seem like that's the agenda these days.
And then I was saying to somebody this morning, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in a late 80s, early 90s situation with loans coming due, receiverships being put into place, and all of a sudden you'll see the same, all of a sudden I think there's going to be a ton of buildings for sale really cheap in the Bronx, and it's
I mean,
scary.
I mean, it comes down to the unintended consequences. And, as opposed to sitting down and talking with the community at large and getting everyone at a table to figure out effective, smart solutions that help everyone wants to drive such a hard bargain that the only thing that they'll wake up and realize is when the economics no longer make sense, and when services need to be cut, and when all the other things that are important to run this city can't be dealt with. At that point, maybe they'll come to their realization that driving this hard of a bargain isn't healthy for the city. Like, everyone needs to walk away a little bit unhappy in order for things to actually move in the positive direction. But right now, that just certainly doesn't seem at all reasonable. I mean, it's just a frustrating time to be in our industry with everyone trying to blame the community at large for the issues that are far greater than the community at large.
And then we get the double whammy now. I don't know the exact details of it, but it sounds like, again, there's going to be, hurting the industry. When I say the industry, I'm talking the brokerage industry in terms of the changes that are now going to come about. I believe they're telling sellers that they don't have to pay the buyer's broker. I don't know. Can you tell us about it, Gary?
I'm going to turn that over to Neil.
So it actually goes back to the June 2019, the HSTPA, and the Department of State issued an opinion that said that they believe that the HSTPA prevented a tenant's broker, or rather a landlord's broker, collecting a commission from the tenant. So just to level set, there is no limitation on the collection of commissions in New York State. There's no requirement who pays the commission and so on. So the Department of State took this position that the landlord's broker could not collect from the tenant. And what happened was REBNY and the New York State Association of Realtors sued the Department of State, and they won. The judge agreed that the HSTPA, there was no interpretation. The problem that we have, though, is that that concept has been floating around both at the city and the state level. So there is currently a potential bill pending at the city level and the state level, which would codify what the interpretation of the Department of State was. It's problematic on so many different levels, not the least of which is, do they actually think that by limiting what a broker can collect, it is going to change, number one, the economics, and number two, make housing any more affordable? Because the truth of the matter is, all that these things do, money is fungible, and it will just shift from one party to another. And so again, maybe these unintended consequences, I don't see how they ultimately work. So I'm concerned about the idea of that it's not going to do what it's supposed to accomplish. Number two, I'm concerned that they start talking about limiting commissions on rentals. Well, why would they start talking about limiting commissions on purchase and sales? And why would they start not limiting commissions, Jamie, on what we can charge, limiting what we can charge, and all, I guess.
Well, if they do that, Neil, I hope that the bar is going to start a lot higher than we're at.
So so there's just so many different concerns. And I go back to what Gary said, everything that not everything, that's an overgeneralization, but so many things that we see may be well-intended, but the results don't turn out the way that they expected. And that's on a macro level. You talked about it on a very macro level, right? That's our city economy, that's our housing market. And then you brought it down to a commission, which is a huge issue. I'll bring it down to a very micro level, which would be like this recent requirement that landlords attach to their leases a flood disclosure. So the intention is a good intention. The idea is to let a tenant know if they're moving into a property that the property is in a flood zone. That's the intention. Okay, so it's a good intention, right? People were moving into properties, they didn't know about this, their property is flooded, they lose their personal belongings, they don't have insurance. Great, so it's a great idea, except that now try to go figure out if a property is in a flood zone. They point you to FEMA and the FEMA map, And then guess what? Go to FEMA and see if you can figure out so easily whether your property is in a flood zone. And not only that, but there's two different types of flood zones and so on. So, we're saying to the real estate brokers, remember, that's my biggest constituency, don't fill out the form. Let the landlord fill out the form, or let the landlord talk to their attorney about filling out the form, because I tried to go to FEMA map and it's not so easy to do. So again, it's well-intended consequences, but it feels like things just aren't thought out. And that is, that makes things, certainly creates struggles for us, and particularly for people just trying to do their jobs.
I mean, if you think about it, when you talk about affordability, the broker is the least expensive concept in the concept of affordability. Brokers don't set land prices. That's number one. Brokers don't set all the rules, regulations, and fees and costs and expenses that come along with people building buildings. They're not the ones, the cost for the labor. And if it's union labor, obviously there's a cost to that. All the supplies, all the trades, all the insurance, all the municipalities, insurance, you name it. There's all of these costs and all of these expenses that developers incur to bring their properties to market. And they also incur risk, which no one in the city cares about, but they incur risk, right? And taxes and everything else along with it. So this concept of limiting or assigning the broker to pay this or that, I mean, the tenant to pay versus that, ultimately speaking, that's not what makes housing expensive. Okay, so the city doesn't address the real root of the problems that actually exist. They just look for a scapegoat. And the brokerage community becomes that scapegoat because it's easy for them to point the finger at the broker. And it makes it very frustrating for people that are really trying to do a good job, trying to work hard, trying to make a living, trying to do the best that they could do. And when half the market, people could go without use a broker, that's the pure definition of a fair, open market. When you don't need to utilize someone's services, but you elect to because that person provides a value, it's a free market, it's negotiable, the city should stay out of it. And just like Neil's saying, can it go to legal fees? Can it go to accountant fees? Can it go to this? Who knows? Because they don't act in reality in terms of like how it works. They're looking for votes, right? And they're looking to raise their own public profiles. And there are certain things that can get them in the news, and there's other things that can't. Versus real, true, hard discussions on how to work together to come up with effective solutions. Everyone at Rebney and everyone at the brokerage community would welcome intelligent conversation instead of being dictated to when we've already seen when they do things without consulting, the unintended consequences are enormous. Okay, 2019 rent laws, the prices have not come down. They've only gone up. There's lack of inventory. That's directly related to what they did. And as opposed to saying, you know what, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we didn't understand things. Let's go back and figure it out with the community at large. They have no intentions of ever opening it because as far as they're concerned, it worked. And all facts tell them it didn't work. So it's just frustrating when there's good solutions that could come from compromise that we don't seem to be able to get to. So that concerns me just about where the city is headed.
Everything is optics, right? So some things may be well-intentioned, but it ultimately goes back to the optics without having real decision makers, real feet on the street that are affected by these actions, and that's not taken into account. And then, quite frankly, we have to clean up the mess after. That's what's even more frustrating.
And
right, because
then,
we're left holding the bag.
and what about, we're not even, the problems haven't even begun because the migrants keep coming in and they're in our buildings, they're in the parks, and and what's going to happen when the 60 days is up and they move them from one location to another? That's not, I don't even get what that's solving either. That was the newest rule, right? They get 60 days per location or something like that.
Something along those lines. Look, that's certainly a whole other issue that the city needs to contend with, and the difficulty that they're trying to find housing and help these people have some sort of safety. It's a difficult situation because there just aren't the options that people think that there are in this city, and the city also doesn't financially have the resources to actually accommodate all of this. So there's just so many things that are just not being thought about to work together. And I understand that's a problem that's it's a humanitarian issue. We're helping these people, trying to help them find a home, find shelter, get their kids educated. There's so many things, but the system doesn't have the capacity to handle this much in such a short period of time. So it's like,
And
I don't know
have
the
the
solution. It's
safety.
well above me. I mean, I
Right.
don't know how they're going to accomplish this, but
And the
it's certainly a
safety.
problem. Yeah.
So I'm all for safe haven, right? That's not what we're talking, we're really not talking about there. We're just talking about a physical infrastructure that cannot
Correct.
handle any more people. We're just talking about a housing crisis that exists before, but before we start talking about that issue. So it has nothing to do, from my perspective, it's not, that's not, the moral imperative is not the question. It's, we just physically don't have the infrastructure to handle this. We have a housing issue, we have an employment issue, and where are we going to put people? Just
The
it's
schools, the
crazy.
schools are all
So-
too crowded already.
Right. Schools previously would have people be outside in the playground at certain times of the day so they wouldn't be overcrowded. So this is why it's an issue. It's not an issue because people don't want to help. People want to help. But it's like Neil said, it's like it's a capacity problem. And it's like, I don't know how you solve it when there is no more land being created. There is at the moment no more housing being created. There's no more schools at the moment that can accommodate it. There's just such a pressure on the system, and there's so much that everyone's dealing with. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that everyone has a million things on their plate, whether it's on the private or public side of the world. But there just has to be more effective communication so that everybody can actually communicate that is offering something of substance to the conversation. It's not a one-sided conversation, any one of these issues. Like, there's a multitude of ways to work. It's just whether people want to get together and actually do that.
And they're doing it across the board, because now let's talk a little bit about 421A. I believe that Hotchel said there's going to be some form of J51. I know it just came out like yesterday, so I'm not really certain as to what the details of it are, but I know that there is nothing like the old 421A, then the reformed 421A. I don't know anybody that's participating in this new one. Do you know anything about it, Neil?
I mean, just, I don't participate in that kind of policy side. But I can tell you, and I agree with you, there is no program out there right now that is incentivizing builders to build, to create more units. It's the economics just don't work. And until we figure that out, I don't see that happening. Everything is more expensive, and you've got to incentivize developers to develop. And we're certainly not doing that right now.
And like the people that block these rules, all they focus on is the tax benefits that someone gets from building versus all the other good that comes from it. And it's difficult because they're not understanding. And listen, you're not in that world. You don't know all the costs and the stacks and the structure. I get that, and I appreciate that. But like, developers want to develop, right? That's in their blood. That's what they want to do. But they're also very smart business people, that they're private companies, but the government wants them to act like public builders, and that they should take a loss. And unfortunately, given the economics of the way the world works, that's just not something they're going to do. And if nobody is taking advantage of this, and you see so little permits being pulled for jobs and all of this stuff, it has to tell you that it actually works the same way for every developer. Because if there were tons of other people doing it and certain others weren't, then that would be one thing. But when everyone is on the same side, like under current circumstances, even though I want to build, I can't. You would think that people would go back to the drawing board and try to figure out a solution, but it just, like, everyone focuses on the wrong, I guess, benefit, let's call it, of the tax benefit. You wouldn't need the tax benefit of all the other things that I said earlier didn't exist financially, but they do. So developers have to figure out a solution that makes it affordable for them to make money themselves, and at the same time, serve the broader public of finding affordable housing. It has to be, a true partnership to help both sides of the equation. And without those incentives, you're clearly seeing by the lack of building that it's not viable today.
Did you guys see, there was an article in the paper not that long ago, and you probably know about this anyway, which is that how the private ownership and management of the public housing, how far superior it was when it was taken over private as opposed to the city management. And the amount of money that the city's lost in their own buildings just by not giving up that management and just letting management manage in, privately, the way that they know how to do it, that alone, you have all this disgusting rundown city housing and they can turn it over to private hands, but they won't.
Listen, I think that people, once again, it comes back to what's your goal, what's your agenda, what do you want to accomplish? And of what's been done to the date isn't working and isn't achieving the goals that everyone wants to achieve, then you need to go back to the drawing board. But it just seems like that, at least at the moment, isn't something that, like the city council, in particular, in many issues, they don't want to have those conversations. Because I think underneath it all, everyone wants to solve the problems that ail the city, because everyone loves the city. You're all invested in the city in one way, shape, or form, and we want to do the right thing. But if the policies don't allow people to do the right thing, it makes it very difficult, because it's a very circular conversation that lands up going nowhere, because we want you to do this. Well, we can't do this without that. Well, we're not giving you that. So then we're not doing that. Then months and months go by, and then maybe something's brought up, but it's a lot of what ifs. And I think that, cooler heads should prevail to think about the long-term viability of the city. And the way you do that is get out of your own comfort zone, and people need to bend a little bit. So hopefully we're going to get there sooner than later. I know, like, from the Rebney side of the world, and Neil and me and a lot of other people in this community put a lot of time in to try to work with the city politicians to push things forward, and hopefully sooner or later something's going to click and get things moving in the right direction, because everyone wants to see it go there. It's just there's got to be a reason to make it happen.
Neil, you want to finish us off on that note? Because I know you also have been working tirelessly with Rebney to try and make changes here that just.
But I think we all have to be optimistic, right? We can't. This is kind of it's a reality-based conversation. We do have to be optimistic that our elected officials will do the right thing, and we will. I know that Rebney. I'm a cheerleader, right? I'll be the first. Really works hard to do that. So we'll continue to do it. That's the bottom line. You want to finish off with property condition disclosure? Do we have time?
Oh, yes, please, definitely.
So just for our audience, I want to remind everyone that that there's a change in the law to the delivery of the property condition disclosure form. New York State has had for many years a requirement that a seller in a residential transaction complete something called the property condition disclosure form. So it's for 1 to 4 family properties, not co-ops or condos. The problem was that the law contained a provision that said that if the seller didn't give the property condition disclosure form, they could give a $500 credit to the purchaser. So in geographical areas like upstate New York, it was common practice for the seller to complete the form. Downstate, the seller virtually never completed the form. Jamie, I think I've seen it completed
I've never seen it done, right?
Once or twice. So the Governor Hochul just signed a law that says that the $500 credit is no longer going to be available as an option, and therefore sellers are going to have to complete this form. So just putting our broker community on notice, quite frankly, putting sellers' attorneys and buyers' attorneys on notice too, that there is going to be a fundamental shift in terms of disclosure sooner than later, and everyone should be aware of it, particularly the brokers. The law always said that the buyer's broker and the seller's broker had an obligation to inform the parties of the existence of the form. But now we're going to have a lot of sellers asking a lot of questions about how to complete this. It's like 7 pages, 90 questions. So I recommend that attorneys, agents go and read the form, because you are going to be getting a lot of questions about this.
Neil, let me ask you a question, because I'm not really familiar with the form in the sense that no one ever used it, so never really spent time looking at it. It sounds quite exhaustive if you're telling me that it's 90 questions. Like, how many sellers are going to truly have access to give the right sort of information and data that they're asking for? Like, I can understand the broader reason behind it, but if you make it so overly complicated that yourself or other smart people in the industry that do this for a living can't figure it out, like, has there been discussion about how to streamline this process with the state, city, whomever? Like, or the answer is just they don't care?
No, well, they don't care. But most of the answers are yes, no, or unknown. So I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of unknowns that are checked. It doesn't, it doesn't require them to get up on the roof and do an inspection. If it says, do you know, I'm just throwing, do you know of any leaks on your roof? So yes, no, or unknown. You may check off unknown. You may go, so, curious to see, look, it's been done upstate for a long time. Never really heard much about it. We'll see. But again, just everyone should familiarize themselves with it because it's definitely going to be a change in the way that we conduct residential closings.
We'll give,
My assumption would be a lot of people are just gonna check unknown because they don't want to have any liability after the fact.
Yeah, and then we as attorneys are probably, I'm sure we'll need to, because we are a buyer beware state, and we're going to put in something to the effect of, hey, that was completed to the best of our knowledge, but you're not going to have any liability unless there was
No
unless
recourse.
So
Right. And when do you know when's that going into effect?
I want to say March, but I can check on that. We did a question of the week, so I want to say March.
we'll give New Yorkers another reason to sue people.
Yeah.
Let's hope
That's what
not.
everyone needs.
Let's hope not.
Exactly. All right, guys, this was really good. I will look forward to packaging this up and
Sure.
getting this back to you guys. And I'm happy that we were able to get together again, and hopefully we'll get to do it
Thanks.
again for the.
Yes, we appreciate it as
Thanks for
always.
having us, James.
All right, it's really good to see you both.
See you soon.
Have a great rest of the week.
Bye.
Take care.
All right.